Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Would you please stand for the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gonna deviate from the agenda just a little bit. I'd like to turn the floor over to Councilman Barrett.
Today, I'm going to honor and recognize Thor in his tribute to the county and to the city of Columbia City on it for his retirement. 33 years, 27 with the city, and 29
with the city. And 4 with the county.
29 on it. And in doing this, I have a challenge coin for you that says thank you on it. So I have known Thor ever since he's been a little guy on it. And I think your dad and mom will be extremely proud of you right now. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. John was one of my heroes when I was a little boy. Him and Linda were very good friends with my mom and dad, and he was one of the people that inspired me to go into law enforcement. Along with Dallard Tackett, he was my next door neighbor. Dallard saved our house one Thanksgiving when the house caught on fire. And they were good friends with my mom and dad, but I thank you, John, and I have a lot of respect for you, so this means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Yep. Very nice. Congratulations, Thor. Okay, on the agenda, Whitley County 4-H Club. Lori, like to come forward?
Thank you. I am here representing the Board of Directors for Whitley County 4-H Club Incorporated. We were here in 2019 to speak to you as well before everything changed. And you were kind enough to give us an additional appropriation out of the seeded funds for Whitley County. So we wanted to come back and report back to you what we did with that 40,000 to show you that we were good stewards of your money and to show you what your investment went for. So if I can pass those around. A little bit about the Whitley County 4-H program. We are a 501c3 organization. We're run by a board of 14 volunteer directors. And so we spend a lot of time raising funds. That's our primary thing. We fund the 4-H program. We know that the 4-H program is sponsored by Purdue University, but financially it's funded by our local board. So we raise funds for the facilities, for the management, for all the utilities and things like that. We also raise funds for the ribbons, the plaques, the judges, the project manuals, all the things that go into the program. We do service over 800 youth in the Whitley County community, which is fantastic. And we couldn't do anything without our thousands of volunteers that we have. So it's a total volunteer-run organization. So like I said, when we came to you before, you guys were able to give us $40,000 on seeded funds. And that list of projects on the front are projects that we have been able to accomplish since that time. Now, obviously, that list there totals way more than $40,000. So we did continue our fundraising. We continue to do targeted projects to raise funds for these programs. And then we use those funds to fulfill any shortcomings. Even throughout COVID, we continue to do all of our fundraising meals. We just had to modify. We did them in a drive-through fashion. We were able to host all of our fairs, one of the few counties in the state of Indiana that went ahead and held our fair. Just a modified version to follow all of the protocols at the time, but we were able to keep that going with our community support. So some of our projects there that you see have been necessities to keep the fairgrounds running. Some people question the fairgrounds thinking it's a 1 week a year event. And I can tell you that is far from the truth. So we have huge shows throughout the school year, throughout summer. So far, we've already kicked off our season. Our season started in March. As far as shows go, so we've had cattle shows, we've had 3 so far. We've got rabbit shows coming up, we've got hog shows coming up, all affiliated with the 4-H program, but not direct 4-H babies. So our rentals are increasing. Our 4-H center is rented almost every weekend throughout the year. So it's really hard to find a time when that building is having kids. So some of these projects that you see, we actually had to pick and choose our dates. So we were able to totally redo the entire kitchen of the 4-H center, which greatly improved the situation in there. The health department worked with us greatly to make sure we were all within the standards. And so we resurfaced the entire floor. It had been old and was starting to chip off. So we were able to do that. We were able to do some appliances, some new sinks to get the kitchen totally made over. We replaced all of the windows in the main concession stand to be a little more energy efficient. And you can see that entire list there, just trying to keep the fairgrounds upgraded, safe, secure. We had some grants come in from other affiliates as well, like the AWS Foundation. So we were able to do a huge handicap ramp leading up to the 4-H center to make it more accessible. Of course, one project always leads to another, so now we determined that the door is not wide enough for our wheelchairs to get through, that beautiful ramp leads to. So we have that on our future projects. But we've been able to continue to make those investments. And so we want to thank you for your contribution, and thank you for what you've done to continue supporting the program. Now, that being said, on the other side, you'll see some of our future projects. Like a homeowner, like anything else, projects always creep up that you weren't expecting. And that top one is the one that has crept up on us in the past few months. The furnaces went out in the 4-H center. And so we've been working with local vendors. We've been nickel and diming them over the past several years to keep the furnaces running. That's a huge open space, and there are 4 furnaces that keep that place heated. And as they've aged and upkeep has become more and more expensive, we are finally to the point where it's time to replace them. And so in working with some local electricians and some local people, we're looking at about an $85,000 project to get those furnaces upgraded. Because in order to do the energy efficient furnaces that we need to do that size of the space, we have to upgrade the electrical to 3-phase electric. And so REMC is working with us on that. But that's a big project that we are funding right now, that is then going to move everything else down the wish list for us. So you see our wish list there of things that we are hoping to do to continue improving the fairground. The table on the left shows the tax appropriations that Whitley County 4-H has gotten from the county. And so if you look back in the early 2000s, we were getting approximately $60,000 to $65,000 in tax appropriations from the county. Now that is down in the $20,000 range. We understand times are different, but this is just our ask to you that if you have funds available that we can reconsider for tax appropriations to keep our fairgrounds going on. Any questions? Thank you.
Laura, just a second.
Yeah.
Of course, I've been associated with 4-H and so forth for a lot of years. I think it's one of the most positive youth programs we have in the county. I also think it's the longest social event in the county, and it brings people from all sections of the county together. Sometimes they don't see each other for a year, but they do see them. I think it's an atmosphere where families can go down there and they don't have to worry so much about their kids and so forth, because it's a pretty safe atmosphere. So I applaud the 4-H. Revenue has dropped. We know that, but you continue to do a lot, and those fairgrounds do provide a lot of use for organizations and so forth. So I do applaud the 4-H program, and very worthwhile.
Thank you. We work really hard to keep our fair free and to keep our parking free. We want to be able to say and still do that. That's a high goal on our board's priority list, to keep it free for all of our communities. So I appreciate that.
I'd like to say your presentation's excellent.
Well, thank
The
you.
information you provide, and I'll keep this for when we do budget. And 4-H isn't just for children. I mean, the adults congregate down there.
Right.
And it's just as meaningful to them. And I find the adults' participation growing from what I've been involved in. But this gives us all the information. You've collected it very well. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Scott Wagner.
Good morning.
Morning.
So a little backdrop on this. Several years ago, the auditor's office and the state board of accounts once our grants to have budgets to them. Before that, we never budgeted grants. We just drove through from them every year. The accreditation grant and a couple other grants were not budgeted for this year. I think it was a misunderstanding on my part to know that in order to get money, use money from those grants, it has to be a budgeted. That's why we're here today to pay a bill that we're using a grant for. Just need to have that appropriated correctly. That way the process is followed. And I'll do my best to try not to use those grants this year so I don't have to keep on coming back for appropriations out of those grants. But 2024, we will have a budget for all of our grants, which are 11 of them. So we won't have to do this in the future. Any questions from me?
You might, on your appropriations, can you tell us what that's for? You got a few, I kidded you when you come in this morning.
Yes. So the Health Infrastructure Grant is a grant that started in the fall of 2011. The Health Department, as well as other Northeast Indiana health departments, participated in a accreditation project with the state of Indiana. And for that, they gave us money for that. And it eventually got up to about $57,000. So over the last 12 years or so, we've used that money a lot for items and trainings that don't fit in the normal budget. And we've been using that, and it's dwindling down. Like you can see there, $6,800. So by the end of next year, it probably will be gone completely, and that won't exist anymore. As far as supplies, other services, we did some training out of that. That's what that's for. It's for training, for education. Typically, Dr. Burkett has allowed people, all employees, once every 5 years to use $1,000 towards education for that grant, since that grant's an open-ended, non-binding grant. And so a couple of our employees have used that for additional trainings for their job. And supplies are more like just, office supplies, basic things, nothing significant. And so we broke it down like that because it's most likely to be used for educational purposes, conferences, things like that, that normally they wouldn't be able to go to.
Questions for Scott? We have several. Tiffany says we can do this in one motion if we want to.
I make a motion, we do all the additional appropriations as one.
I'll second it.
Motion by Tom, a second by Kim, that we approve all these requests. Discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, the same. Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Do you want a short update to the legislation process? So as you know, last Friday, the session ended. They did pass funding for the State Department of Health and local health departments at $75 million this year, $150 million next year. A lot of the other things that they were asking for did not get appropriated. So no regional health departments from the state, anything like that, is going to go through at this time. Again, expecting somewhere between now and July 1st, we'll be getting a letter for the commissioners and council to look at whether they want to hop onto that commission's recommendations or not. So we have not seen anything yet. Let's see, Wednesday, tomorrow, there'll be a call. So I'll listen to that and see what the next steps are.
Will we be given a proper notice of what's included in that? And we can't pick and choose, correct?
Right. So they're going to ask if you sign on to it to be a participating county, that the health department then would be responsible by the year 2025, which would be July 1st of 2024, because they are a July to June calendar. So they're not expecting this year that we would be fully up on board with everything. But they're expecting that next July, we would start being 100% compliant with all their rules that are in there. And there are a lot. So I'm hoping that they do come out with a full sheet for every county that not only explains the cost benefit there, but then also all the rules underneath. Keep in mind, this is not a state law, the appropriation. It's a next 2 years. And that appropriation can be taken away. It cannot be voted on again. So that's some of my concerns is that, sure, all these things are great looking, but in 2 years, if there's a different governor, if there's somebody else there, are they going to want to continue to spend $200 million?
After you've already started the program.
Right. So I don't know what that looks like. I hope that it does. If it's not, I'll ask for it so that it's very clear how, not only financially, but then what things you have to do down to daily things. There's a lot.
I don't know if everybody's been keeping up with Scott's information he's been passing to us. It's overwhelming. And I baby stepped it because it's that overwhelming. But I hope everyone realizes you need to digest that because there's things listed in that we would have to comply with to get the rest of it. And you may not agree with that. So you need to really look at that when it comes to it. That's just my opinion.
Any other questions for me today?
No, I don't believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you. In the back, can you hear all right? Okay. Wanted to make sure. Next on the agenda, sick time, payout additional appropriation. Chad or Tiffany?
on that.
Okay.
So when we had Baker Tilly do our comprehensive financial plan last year, they were questioning why we were utilizing our rainy day fund to pay out the sick time payout, which I believe is from the 2009 when we went from sick time, wrapped it all up into PTO. There were certain individuals that had, I don't know what the reasoning was for it, but extra hours or something that when they leave, they will be compensated for that. So we need to have a line item for when they do leave, they'll pay them out. And at that point, their suggestion was to put it in the commissioner's budget out of county gen. That way we're not dwindling the already very low rainy day fund. There's not even enough to cover the potential that could be spent out of rainy day anyway. So every year it's 15,000 and it was not done. We nixed the rainy day, but didn't put it in commissioner. So it's just fixing that.
So that they're wanting to put this in under the commissioner's budget. And
The money's there, we're just moving it over. That, no.
We're not using the fund that it was taken out of. This is
We're going to
county
take out of
gen.
county general rather than rainy day. From now on, we're going to move from county general to.
Okay. And still hold the rainy day.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the rainy day would just sit.
So there'll still be a rainy day fund that will pay some things out of.
There's no budget for that.
Okay.
kind of protects its money.
Mhm.
Any
So
further?
how do you fund that? Then how do you fund that line item in the commissioner's budget? Where do the funds come from?
We're just adding another line item.
And funding it. Right? So the money's there, you're saying the money's there in the
Oh,
commissioner's
yes.
budget?
Well, no, we're adding it. That's what this is.
But you're not moving the money from rainy day fund and putting it in commissioner's general. So you're creating a line item in commissioner's general. How do you fund that line item?
County
It's
general.
coming from the county general.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
I have a question. How often does those payouts happen?
It just depends on if somebody retires or leaves. I think last year we had one or two. This year, for the start of the year for Jason, going from an employee to an elected official, he had one. So it just depends on when people retire or leave. So it's,
Why
I
wouldn't,
can't give you an exact.
so why would we need to create another line item in the commissioner's budget and give them control over spending that money if it's such a individual event? It's not happening every month or every couple months. It's just when somebody retires. Why wouldn't we retain control and make those payments ourselves out of county general when they need to be made? That could be brought to council. And we could make that decision then
We can do
to
that if
approve
that's what you prefer. I can come every time that we have somebody that's gonna be leaving and give you an exact dollar amount. I'm good with that too.
Well, do we know what the liability is, how much exposure we have to them dollars?
Like the overall what it could be, I have that upstairs. I don't have it down here.
Okay.
I can get you that.
That might be what she was getting a little bit at, Thor, and then the control, so.
But I don't look at it as a day-to-day operation. The commissioner's responsibilities are day-to-day operations. We're long-term and we're responsible for, and this isn't a weekly or a monthly item. It's once every whenever. I think that should remain under our control and be brought to us at the appropriate time.
So every time we do a payout, just do an additional and bring it to the body.
That's the way I feel.
I would agree with you. Is there a cap on hours earned, or how are the sick hours earned? Is that per pay?
But it's not anymore. It stopped in 2009. I wasn't here, so I can't really speak on that for sure, but I do believe that's what happened. And there were certain individuals that exceeded the threshold. I'm not real sure on that, but so it won't be something that keeps happening. It's just a certain list of individuals at that time.
Well,
I can provide you that list
I
too.
think if we do it that way, also as this program or as these events cease to exist, then we don't have to worry about having an open line item in the commissioner's report, or commissioner's budget that has to be eliminated later because we're not going to fund it. And we don't have to then at budget time figure out how much we need to fund it with.
Well, knowing what the total liability is, potential liability on that, I think it's important to.
I don't think that affects though, if we're going to pay it or not and where it gets paid.
Well, but it gives us an idea of what we know that's going to have to be paid out at some point. Is all.
But it's paid out as that individual retires.
Or leaves us, right?
It could be 2,000, it could be 4,000, depending on what.
Because that should be laid out in the budget every year. I mean, it should be on there.
Well, you just don't know it on the budget every year when someone decides to retire though.
Yeah,
That
I
could
know. That's
happen.
why you need to know what could possibly happen though.
What that lump sum could be. I know companies keep track of that. I mean, that's a real liability that if you're gonna have to pay it out, you gotta make sure the funds are there when the time comes. So. So do you want to wait till the next meeting and get the amount? Or do you want to take action today?
Well, I think no action is appropriate.
Till we find that amount out?
Yeah.
Is this our next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And so just to be clear, do you want me to do a new one with what has already been paid out? For, like, so we had one this year and that was when the sheriff went to an elected position. Do you want me to just do that dollar amount? Or,
Is that one still waiting to be funded?
no, it had to be paid out.
What did we pay it out of?
We paid it out of the rainy day until we get approval to make that adjustment to county general, wherever you guys decide it gets paid.
No, past amounts aren't going to help us come budget time. We need to know
Well,
it.
no, but I'm saying that already in 2023, we've used some. So I just want clarification on how you would like me to proceed. Do you want me to bring back this 15,000 or do you want me to bring back the exact dollar amount that's already been spent? And come
See what you're
forward
saying.
each time.
Well, my understanding is what you're asking us now is to fund it out of county general, regardless of whether it's in our control or the commissioners. You're asking to have it funded out of county general rather than the rainy day fund. So in my mind, that does not affect anything that's been done in the past up until this point, because it was done under the guidelines of what we had set up. So I don't think that we need to look at anything from the past. I think that we need to, my idea is that we just need to have it brought to us every time that it needs, one of these events occurs, that it needs to be funded. President Algebright would like for us to have a report on what our total possible liability would be. That wouldn't change my mind on how I think that it should be paid out, but I think maybe that would be good information for everybody to have. I mean, if worst case scenario and everybody that would have the potential to be paid out would come in tomorrow and retire, then it's going to come out of county general regardless. So it's going to come out of there at some point. I don't know why we need to go into the path.
Other thoughts? Anyone? So you will need to just approve that it's going to come out of county general, but it will come to the council at each time. And then you're going to give us an amount that looks like we're going to be liable for down the road, whenever that happens. I think that's just information for us and everyone to know. So we'll do that next meeting.
Yeah, I can give you that.
Okay. We'll just take care of that next meeting. Okay, Jan?
Good morning.
Morning.
What questions can I answer?
Last meeting, we tabled overtime compensation. If I'm correct, the commissioners had approved it at the end of the year or in January. You changed it in the personnel manual. And there's been discussion since then. Commissioners voted again to change it back to what it had been originally.
Correct.
It came to us. We tabled it till this meeting. Can you explain
History?
the history and how it works?
Okay. Well, when we met for approximately a year, the personnel, or not personnel, but policy manual committee, it's made up of different individuals, department heads and employees. And at that time, they did not want to change it. I do want to clarify that. They did not ask for it to be changed. They preferred for it to stay the same. The change happened at a higher level after we discussed with the labor attorney out of Fort Wayne and just had some conversations with the commissioners at that time, which was prior to Rob coming on board. So at that time, it was believed that we should change that policy. So both bodies, council and commissioners, did approve that at the end of December or beginning of January. And then after further discussion with different departments and hearing their concerns, it was voted on again, like as you mentioned recently, to revert back to previous policy. There has been, I know Joan asked for a history, and I was able to find out that in 2004, our policy was that all paid leave was counted as hours worked. But then in 2009, we changed it to where we took out comp leave and sick leave. And then when we went in 2017, when we went to PTO, that's when it went back to just a blanket, all paid leave was counted.
Over the years, there've been changes
There's been some
back and forth.
changes back and forth. Yeah, I did provide you with some information, just comparing different counties that was requested of me. And I also provided the email from the labor attorney explaining a little bit more about that. So I provided that to you as well.
And And I think you've all seen it on the back of what Jen had given us with what other counties are doing. Chad, do you have anything to say on this?
No, I mean, I can just say that when we did approve the policy manual, maybe in December or January, we immediately started hearing from employees who could be affected by that rule, namely the highway department, but there were others. Jessica Hockemeyer elections and obviously the sheriff's department. And so we met multiple times and discussed the policy and what that could mean for them, how it could negatively affect them or positively affect them. And we heard their concerns. So I asked the auditor's office to just pause, just not enact that policy until we had time to take a deep dive. And then recently in March, we brought it back onto the agenda and voted, and the commissioners voted to approve reverting back to the previous policy.
Was that unanimous?
It was not unanimous, but it was majority.
This is open for discussion, so thoughts?
So where we're at now, if we vote on today, holidays and paid bereavement leave would be considered. Is that where there's so many, that would be considered calculating for overtime. But PTO time would not? Is that where we're at on?
Well, that's one option to do somewhat of a compromise, but the wording in 2022 was that all paid time off, PTO, bereavement leave, holidays, all paid time off is considered as hours worked. And then in the current policy, what we passed was
Did you give us the paragraph that word that?
yes.
Let's see.
I don't have this one.
So if an employee took a week's vacation, Monday through Friday,
So this is a,
and then come in and work on Saturday, they would be paid overtime for that one day.
Correct.
That's the way that we're wanting to switch it back to.
Correct.
Because normally it's hours worked. Hours worked is compensated by overtime. And I guess my problem with this is a lawyer came in and gave the recommendation and we're just allowing his recommendation.
Well, he didn't necessarily, if you read his email, he didn't necessarily say it was his recommendation. I mean, he did say that it's the majority of his clients don't do that. And if you look at the comparison in counties, some do and some don't, and some do
It's
a
all over the
hybrid.
board.
So it's not necessarily that we have to do it.
Wabash doesn't, hours only work. Kosciuszko hours work. That's just my thoughts. It's hours worked is standard.
I agree with Joan. I think we need to use the suggestion that the labor lawyer said that we don't consider those, that is worked hours. I mean, if that's a standard, then I think we need to.
I wanted to know how it started, and I had asked if we could go back to see how it started, but it goes clear back to when, no one was working or on the board. And then when it kept getting switched, and why did it get switched when they redid the book last year? Why did it get switched? Why was it recommended that it was flipped?
Again, we didn't meet with the labor attorney, but we consulted with the labor attorney for the entire manual, and that was one thing that was pointed out. So that was basically what started it.
Okay.
So I talked to Jen, and we don't know how it goes if we don't approve it. Commissioners approved it. If we don't approve it, then what happens? Does it stay as it is now?
I don't have an
Seems to
answer.
me that we would have to go back and revisit it, but I mean, I don't know why council is like a second level of approval, but I think it's right that they are, because I mean, I think it's checks and balances, right? So, and because it does also impact the budget in this way, not in every way, but policies do have an impact on the budget, namely this one. I think it's good that you're a second level of approval. So if it's not approved, then I guess we have to go back and revisit it, find compromise, or, you know, find something that works for all of us.
Yeah, I've wondered the same thing, why there's two levels. Jen, we've talked. I will tell you that talking with businesses, virtually all of them, it's hours worked. You know, if you took time off, vacation, whatever, they didn't pay overtime until they hit 37 and a half or 40 hours if the person was off. And I was surprised that so many businesses was that way, and I think that's what the attorney is saying. I'm not saying that's right, but it's pretty standard out in the business field, is what I found out talking with people.
I would be interested if there are any department heads here that would like to speak to this. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Katie Fry, Director of the Highway Department. Our employees, myself not included because I'm an exempt employee, so I'm not directly affected by this policy. I don't receive either comp time or receive overtime pay. But one of the main concerns I think that was expressed by the employees that they feel that this in a way weaponizes their benefits. Kind of lumping all of the paid time off into not being considered for being overtime or being considered towards hours worked for overtime. It's very unfortunate if grandma dies, but you took bereavement time and now you have to work on Saturday, so you're not going to be compensated as overtime worked on a day that you wouldn't normally work because your grandma died and you used bereavement time. Or you took a week's vacation with your family and took advantage of your benefit time and then had to come in to cover for a shift for someone who was ill. Or I guess on the sheriff's department, that happens more often than not. Ours is more weather related. So those are going to be very few and far between circumstances, but it does occur. But the sheriff's department and community corrections were kind of along the same circumstances, where if there's someone who has the opportunity to work on a day that someone else needs coverage, that they're really kind of incentivized to not work for them because they're not going to be paid additional time if they took a paid benefit time prior to that date. It was also brought up that although no one is unappreciative of the 37.5-hour week as opposed to the 40-hour week, their regularly scheduled week does consist of 37.5 hours. But if they do come in and work an additional however many hours, that next 2.5, although it's not regularly scheduled hours, by all intents and purposes is considered overtime from their regularly scheduled work hours. It is considered straight time pay. So they have to work an additional 2.5 hours prior to being even considered to be able to pay at the pay rate for time and a half. So there was just some concerns on their part as to feeling like that it makes it hard for them to use their benefit time. It makes it to where almost their comp time, they won't really necessarily even be able to accrue the comp time because there won't be as many opportunities for them to earn it or to be able to use it for that matter. So there's a lot of negative impacts on the people who work the 24-hour schedules, who are on call 24 hours. There's not really a lot of commonly worked overtime in some of the other offices, but they're all aware that they do have the jobs that they signed up for, and they're very well aware that they could be on call or come in at any time and point in day. But I do support not removing that as an incentive for them to come in and work on time that they are not scheduled, because that is their personal time.
They're not necessarily scheduled to work that, but they're doing the county a service, and they're doing sometimes their fellow employees a service if they are making up time for them.
I know that the storm last summer probably was affected by this a little bit. But I don't know how many were on vacation that it really affected. I'd be interested to know historically in the departments, how often this came up, because I have to think that it doesn't come up very much.
For our department, like I said, since we're going to be more weather dependent or event reactive, I would probably assume that it does not affect our department as commonly as it may affect 24-hour facilities such as community corrections or the sheriff's department. But it's something to be considered because it would affect them at some point.
Do you recall, Janet? Happens very often?
And the thing, I guess, that could also be considered when you're making this decision is that, and I can't speak for other departments, but in my department, there's not a way that it can be abused. There's no way to know if you're going to be called out or you're going to have to work overtime as reactive to a storm. All of our staff are encouraged to be available during the winter season when we know that's going to probably be the most likely circumstance or likely possibility. But everyone's usually available. People try not to take vacation when they know that there's a storm coming. People don't take time off to prepare. So it's not something that is abused by any stretch of the imagination in our departments. And really, I feel that we are very, very lucky to have staff who are so readily available without question when the circumstances require it. And that would go most certainly for the sheriff's department and for community corrections as well, because I know there's a lot of give and take with any circumstance that arises.
Todd, do you have any idea of how often this affects the jail? Weekly? So give me an example. It's not certainly weather related probably too, but
we have several times we have to take inmates to the hospital. That's when we had their 7 days. We had to have around the clock deputies and jailers. Like most departments, ours, we can't get a serious crash at 1:45. That guy he can't just go home.
But that would be considered overtime. What we're talking about is when people are on vacation.
Yeah.
Funeral leave, sick days, and then they're not on the clock. They're not physically working. And then they get called in on whatever day they're back, and then that's when the overtime is to be considered. Not an everyday shift.
Hey, that can happen. So if the guys, most of our guys are 4-2. So that guy's sick on his day 1, and then he has to have overtime during his next 3 days. And there's always a good chance. But again, we can't just go home when it says 2 o'clock or 6 o'clock. We have to stay.
they still get paid.
Whatever job, whatever is going on.
Right.
Or we have a guy that's called in sick, or you have an inmate. It's very free.
And they do get paid, you're correct. So but painting the circumstance would be if someone takes a 12-hour shift off, they use 12 hours of their PTO time, and then they come in for a 12-hour shift. They work their 12-hour shift, but then they work another additional 12-hour overtime for a 24-hour shift.
that 12 hours that they worked as an overtime shift, it's not regularly scheduled. Because of that PTO time will only be paid out as straight time.
I understand that.
So that is something that it's still considered time that's additional from your regularly scheduled work time. So that was the concern, is that it weaponizes the benefit to where if you take your PTO time and you utilize that time, or your bereavement or whatever it may be, that then you have to pick and choose of whether or not you would like to be paid overtime or paid straight
So
time.
what differentiates a county employee from a civilian employee? Because that's not how it works. I mean, they don't do that.
I think that every entity chooses the way that they want to distribute their benefits to their employees, and that the workplace lawyer that was consulted, from what I understood, was that is what is the bare minimum that an employee or employer can do for their employee. That's what's required. So that's the bare minimum requirement, that you have to pay your employees overtime, but the employer can always provide additional benefits to their employees.
I have a question, and maybe anybody can answer. So because I'm new and I'm still kind of learning everything that's going on here, how are our county employees paid? Where is this money coming from?
For my department individually, it's funded separately than all other departments. I believe the sheriff's department is funded separately. I cannot speak for community corrections. I don't know that. But everybody else is paid from county general. But our department is funded through allocations that come from the state that are related to fuel tax and other road related.
So what I'm getting at, I'm glad you said tax, is that all these funds are coming from taxpayers, correct? Does anybody think it's a prudent use of taxpayer money, morally and ethically, to pay this, like you're suggesting? I'm just curious. I would like to know.
I don't know that I would feel that it is an inappropriate use, because again, it's the employees' benefits that are bestowed to them by the county. And I think the employees have every right to be able to use those hours. But I can't say that I agree with the fact that if employees take advantage of their benefits, that they then sacrifice the other potential pay for having to work outside their normal hours.
I think there's a little conception that we have to understand is when a person takes vacation time, PTO, whatever you want to call it, that's great benefit. We're happy to pay that. But it also puts that department, could and can put that department where if it's the sheriff's department, Todd's got to find someone to cover for that person being off. So for every action, there's a reaction. So there's more reaction than just what we're talking about, because it still has to be covered, you know? And so when those people take off, he's got to cover those shifts and so forth. So is the county paying overtime for that person to cover the person on vacation? So it's more than just whether they are taken off and then they come back and they don't get, they get paid, but they don't get time and a half, and so forth. So it's just a little deeper than what we think. You know, I think about the employer side of it. I know that when Billy and Todd, they took that job, they knew there was going to be overtime. The highway department, the people that work there, I think same thing. They know that from time to time, and some of them look forward to it because it's additional pay that they get throughout the year. I know there's guys that used to think, hey, this snow plowing season, we're going to get more income and so forth, and they look forward to that additional income because there was going to be overtime. So it's just a little more than that. We have to cover for when people do take PTO and make sure that the department continues. So it's a little complicated.
And Todd can speak to this as well, but I would just say that I foresee overtime would then need to become, which, I mean, regardless, it can be mandatory overtime. But then it's mandatory straight time. But those hours worked would have to be mandated. Because I foresee probably in the sheriff's department more than anything, people not being willing to give up their Saturday or their Friday night or their Tuesday night or whatever it may be to cover for someone who needs coverage, because they won't be compensated at time and a half outside of their normal work hours. And in addition to that, PTO, we say PTO and we automatically think vacation. It's not just vacation. It's anything. It's sick time.
Right.
It's whatever circumstances may arise.
Personal
benefit
time off.
Yes.
Right.
So it presents a little bit of a challenge because every department is different. And yes, everyone that works in a facility where overtime is possible is well aware that it may occur. But it just makes it very challenging to know that if any benefit time is used at all, even the benefit time that's bestowed to them by the county for holidays, if they take their holiday pay, then I know that there's a lot of them that would rather come in and work on a holiday so they could be considered to be paid for overtime hours on another day of the week, because they'll be paid for that holiday no matter what, whether they work it or not. But it just presents a lot of challenges that the people who do put in these hours have concern with. And again, I'm not affected by it. I don't receive overtime pay. So I just wanted to make sure that I voice the concerns that have been expressed in my department by every employee.
Todd, I assume, Billy, Katie, that when you interview someone, they're made aware that they're in a position that is subject to a lot of possible overtime, whether it's a storm or emergencies or things like that. So they're aware of that when they get hired. Am I correct?
We don't discuss the matter of how they're paid when they work overtime, but they are aware that they work overtime.
That's normal in their employment in that position, that they are probably going to have overtime.
Correct.
Do all your sheriff's department employees work a 4-2 schedule? Dispatch, jail, deputies? And so those jobs are Monday through Friday, 40-hour week jobs, 2,080 hours a year. Those particular ones? No, the other ones. Your sheriff, your administrators that work Monday through Friday. So what the hours come out on a 4-2 schedule for the year? $1,822 hours compared to 2,040 hours. So, but your deputies do, and your jail employees do, because they're, so they're working, so they're scheduled to work 1,830 hours a week or a year compared to 2,080 hours. The 1,950 would be the 4-2 times 8. So what's the 1,830 number that you're talking about?
But their yearly hours is 1830.
That's on the 4 and 2. Katie's department's
All other
19,
departments, well, I guess I can't say the corrections,
like,
but yeah,
no,
37 and a half is the regularly
Yeah.
scheduled number of
Right.
hours.
any more discussion? Todd, do you have anything to say or? Okay,
Morning, Commissioner Basinger. I did vote in favor to change it back to what the previous policy was. The two biggest things a county is charged with is public safety and infrastructure. And really, this policy only affects the sheriff's department and our highway department. And I don't think it's right to penalize them for using their benefits that they have. For instance, the highway department was out on Christmas Eve, and I'm thankful for that. And I do think it's a good prudent use of taxpayer dollars. And I also don't think it's right to compare working for the government and the private sector. In the private sector, they get all types of different benefits that we never would. The sheriff's department, they work like 12-hour shifts right now. And when someone takes off, obviously they have to work more. So to take that away from them and say, well, you're not going to get it and we're too bad because you were hired on it, you knew you were going to get overtime, I don't think is right. They have a really hard job. I wouldn't want to do it. I'm thankful that they work, Saturdays, Sundays, evenings. I'm thankful for the confinement officers. I'm thankful for the highway department. And I don't think it's right to take it away. Do you guys have any questions?
sheriff's department doesn't work 12-hour shifts.
A lot of times they do. Is that correct? A lot of times your guys do have to work 12-hour shifts.
Not regularly though.
So if they take a week, say Monday through Friday on vacation, and then they're, asked to come work Saturday and Sunday, they should get overtime for that because they have to do that. And I'm thankful for it. Without infrastructure and public safety, where does that leave our society?
Thank you. Mark?
Maintenance department. If this did change back to where it wouldn't be covered, it would directly affect our department. We are a very small department, but the guys do know, and they knew when they were hired, that they could be called in at any time, and it happens frequently to get called into the jail for a toilet backup, or it could be, and they're typically on the weekends, 3 in the morning. I mean, any hour of the day, they can get called in. And because we're so small, when someone is on vacation, or if somebody did take a day off and then they got called back in on another day within the same pay period or the same week, it's not much of an incentive to respond to an after hours event if they know they're not going to get that. I mean, they do, but they're not in this job to get rich. But I think they should be compensated. But it would directly affect a small department like that.
And how often does it happen? I mean, they're on
It
vacation and
goes
they're
in-
off.
It goes in cycles. We had a bout not too long ago where it was like every weekend we were going in to the jail.
Well, yeah, but we're talking about people that have been off and then come in. How often does that happen? I mean, this isn't a normal work week.
But because we have so few, if one person's off, the other person has to cover. But if they already had a day scheduled off that week also, that directly would affect that person. As far as how often, I don't have that number. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you, Mark. Well, we've had some pretty good discussion. Thoughts?
What is the commissioners and HR's recommendations at this point?
The commissioner's recommendation would be to revert back to the 2022 rule. That's what we had voted on in March, was to revert back. And that would be counting all time off as hours worked for the purpose of calculating overtime.
HR have a
Well, it puts me in a little bit of a spot, but because I work for the commissioners, I would defer to their, and I respect them, I would defer to their recommendation. I do want to just mention, just because it hasn't been mentioned yet, that there was a third possibility, and that is a kind of a compromise, a hybrid. And I sent it to you, but I'm not sure that you received it. And that was just to take holidays and bereavement leave and consider those as hours worked, but the rest not consider that. So I just propose that as an option as well.
The
And you
idea,
can-
go ahead.
No.
The idea behind that compromise was that if an employee is telling us that they can't come to work, that's voluntary. And so those hours would not be counted for the purpose of calculating overtime. But if the employer is telling the employee they can't come to work, like for example, a holiday, or if something happens that's completely out of their control, like bereavement leave, then those hours would be counted.
That's something I could get behind. I mean, that makes sense to me.
And that's pretty common on our comparisons to other counties, only holidays and jury duties added on one. That's pretty common on here. Huntington does holidays only. Kosciuszko does only hours worked. Noble County does not, they only do hours worked. Wabash does hours worked, but the others do include the holidays, but they'll account for those. So there's a handful that do. I would go for the holidays.
Is that, as Mark said, that our employees don't work for the county government. They don't come working for local government. But we do have a lot of people. They fulfill all of their duties. I feel that it's something that actually work for us because of our benefits and how they really do. So it's an attractive thing to be able to have that, to be able to have additional employees come in. We're trying to hire a truck driver right now, and we just reopened the application period. It's harder than ever to get people. I know the sheriff's department is struggling with having their police staff as well. So I am fearful of removing benefits that are already in place for our current students, and what that does to morale, and what that does to the retention of the employees who may be on the brink of retirement, or that they push the envelope, or it would just be something that would be attractive.
But it isn't current policy. That's what we're trying to decide. It was, but it isn't. Correct.
Thank you for your comments, Katie.
I'm going to say I'm not ready to vote. we're gonna vote, I'll vote, but I'm not
I guess the
ready.
one I'm leaning towards right now is the last one that Jennifer brought up, was that holidays and paid bereavement would be considered as hours worked, but not PTO time. I would vote.
Holiday pay too.
Do what?
They're getting holiday pay too.
Yeah, and they're still getting holiday pay and I could go that far with it, but I can't go with the PTO. I mean, and you're out here in the other side of the world. I've never worked in government until now, but you employees have a lot of benefits out there that on the other side, they don't have. So, I don't want to take it all away from you, but if I go down through here, like Joan did in the surrounding counties, none of them consider that as paid time. So I would meet you in the middle and say I would probably vote for the holidays and paid bereavement, but not for the PTO. That's my feeling right now.
Make that in the form of a motion.
I think there's too many people at this desk still got too many questions that I'm not ready to put that in the form of a motion. I think we all need a little more time to digest this and make sure the decision we're going to come up with is what we really think we want and is fair to everybody in the county, the employees and taxpayers and everybody that's involved in this is my feeling. So I'm not ready to make a motion right now, Joe.
Kim, you're about the only one that hasn't talked.
Well, I'm old school. If you work, you get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid. So I don't think I need to say any more about it. I'm sure that a lot of us grew up that way. I'd probably go along with what Tom was saying. I'd probably go ahead with the holiday. But to get paid to stay home, no. It'd be a long day if I vote for that. And you all know me pretty well too, so. I think we're being pretty generous just to pay for the holidays. On top of what the other benefits that you have.
Thor, anything? You look at me and I think you wanted to say something. Okay.
I
So,
was trying to figure out what you.
well, I hear two things. One is, do we need another month to think about this? Or do we have some interest on one way? Do we want to ask for the motion? Or do you want to wait a month?
You pay your men to stay home?
We've all had this information for an appropriate amount of time, and we all should have had an opportunity to do our homework on this and make up our minds. But I look at this too as one of those topics that come up every so rarely that we've already kind of rushed into this by switching it, then switching it back. Now we want to switch it back. I think another month for all of us to do some more homework, talk with all three commissioners, talk with these departments that it really affects, talk with departments that it doesn't affect, and make sure that you all do your homework and come back here and that we don't just kick this another month after that. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Keep kicking the can down the road and nothing gets done. So
Take a motion to table it to our next meeting.
I have a motion from John that we table this till our next meeting. Second by Tom. Further discussion?
I think the further discussion is adding adding the holiday pay. I think we need time to digest that and figure that out, because right now I would lean towards that. but after pondering it, I may not. I just think that caused me to say, I think we need to table it till next month.
Okay, that's what the motion says.
I'm just saying, I agree. I'll second.
Tom seconded
Tom
already.
seconded.
Any,
I got my mind thinking done.
any other comments? All those, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of tabling it 1 month, raise your right hand. All those opposed, the same? Okay. Thanks, everyone, for their comments. Okay. Redevelopment, Nathan? Thank you.
Good morning. A few weeks ago, I emailed out to you and the commissioners a copy of this Redevelopment Commission annual report. And I've got some black and white copies here. That's kind of the executive summary for reference. If you want a hard copy of this, I know Tom already has one, but if you do want a hard copy, let me know and I can print one. We scheduled this because there was pending legislation that we expected this to actually be a requirement. That legislation died at basically the very last minute. But everybody thought it was still a good idea to go ahead and present to you guys what the Redevelopment Commission has been doing over the past year. So Dale, chime in with anything as well. So the cover there is made up of different photos that we took. Redevelopment Commission has been trying to meet with different businesses and other recipients of TIF dollars. And in 2022, they met with, Sailrite. What's the top photo there, Dale? Thank you. And then the bottom left is the Whitco Career Academy in Larwell, which is actually in the Larwell TIF district. So there are 3 major TIF districts that the County Redevelopment Commission handles. Union, which is the big one, Rail Connect, which is attached to Union, and then Larwell, which was added just a couple years ago, and currently is still in its infancy and not really yet receiving any incremental funds out of that. Page 2 there is the introduction, which is from year to year, doesn't change much, but Dale did include a few updates dealing with median household income of $64,000, which is good for county our size. We're not quite as highly ranked as we were a few years ago in the state, but we still are in 20%, I think, something like that. And then you can see that within the TIF area, we have over $250 million worth of salaries coming from the businesses in the TIF area, which is, in my opinion, pretty impressive. The third page there in the executive summary are the accomplishments. The Redevelopment Commission did many things throughout the year, but these are some of the big highlights. The first one was to initiate construction of a new sewer line along 100 South and 300 East. That is just west of Lincoln Point and just east of Sailrite and Triad. That is in anticipation of a new development project on those 26 acres. Larwell Sewer Extension, which was to serve Red Star, was finished in 2022. Gateway Park Drainage, which handled a lot of different drainage issues, was also finished in 2022. On the development side of things, the last 2 lots in Rail Connect, which was a Redevelopment Commission project from a decade ago, the last 2 available lots were sold and actually closed on a couple months ago, but the process was started in 2022. Ambassador Enterprises was the buyer of those 2 lots. They're looking to expand American Landmaster into Rail Connect. and used a very large lot that was otherwise unusable for their research and development testing, which is kind of cool. As I mentioned, the 100 South site is being supported for development. Impact CMC received various funds to help their renovation of their new location on 600 East, USP coupled products. And then employee attraction and training. The Redevelopment Commission has a history of using training grants to offset certain costs that businesses have coming in, potentially trading that off in lieu of tax abatements. That seems to be a pretty common thing. In 2022, we didn't have any that were new. There were a couple that were paid out in 2020. Going to the financial summary, I won't go through this line by line unless you have questions, but you can see there what the expenses were for the year. Baker Tilly was dealing with an annual financial report. Burcott was the drainage project in Gateway, Brooks Construction, and Indiana Fire Sprinkler, again, dealing with Impact CMC. And then Todd Wise, Sand and Gravel, and Miller Sewer and Drain were related to the Larwell Sewer. Going on to the next page then, the last couple lines of the expenses on the top of that page. The tax revenue bonds, those are the amounts that are paying back the principal and interest on the two outstanding bonds that the Redevelopment Commission has. There's a third that is dealing with Iotron and Soterra, and that is paid by them through their own revenues. So that's a direct reimbursement, essentially. We did not, the Redevelopment Commission in 2022 did not spend anything from the two bonds that we have outstanding. One has already been spent completely, and the other, as you'll see at the year-end balance on the next page, still does have some funds that are earmarked for infrastructure, essentially. So the sewer line project for 100 South and 300 East may take some of those bond proceeds. You can see there what were the revenues, just over $4.3 million for 2022 among all the different revenues. Important to note that the seeded line was a reimbursement because Larwell TIF area did not have any revenues. The Union TIF was paying for the Larwell sewer project, but then CEDA reimbursed that because you can't cross jurisdictions quite like that. So the commissioners said, Redevelopment Commission, go ahead and do this project. You guys are capable of doing that because it's infrastructure, but CEDA will reimburse you. So that's how that worked. And then the year-end balance there, again, this is end of 2022. Overall reserve in TIF funds is just under $12 million, 11.7, 1.4 in bond proceeds for a grand total of available funds to the Redevelopment Commission as of December 31st at $13.1 million. Earlier this year, the Redevelopment Commission did commit $4 million towards the detention center project, so take that off, and that will get you close to the current balance. Did I?
Yeah, and just to reiterate, the economic indicators for the county. Not all those folks are really residents, but that are. And the other thing too, keep in mind is that the revenue is greatly impacted by the property tax. This legislative session, they did not vote on that. That will come up next year that they're looking at for property tax. So that's something that we have to consider for future. We're just, at least for my office, and I know a lot of investor folks are still seeing a lot of interest in that TIF district, the 26 acres that we're developing on 100 North of Paper Crossing is very important.
because as far as an actual shovel-ready site, it's ready to go. There's in the tip district, there's only one. So we're in need of a little more product to sell because there's interest in this. And of course, we like the fact that if we could place something there that we have a little more flexibility without having to incentivize something that we don't have to come in front of this group to ask for that.
Questions or anything for Nathan? Or Dale? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Okay, Dale. Broadband,
Yes, so as described a little bit in the last time I was here in the last council meeting, that we would be coming forward with this. And I want to address a couple things in the advanced materials. I attached the proposed contract with SAM Strategies. Since then, there's been a fair amount of work done on that. It is actually going to be the commissioners and Chad as president will sign that agreement. It has been reviewed by Matt Shipman, and we changed the start date. I think in the copy I'd sent, it's had like an April start date, and now it's a May start date. And the language on the task force has been changed just a little bit. So I just want to reiterate what we're trying to get done, why the SAM strategies, who else we looked at, and then what the reporting will be to follow up. So, SAM strategies is also, again, this was in the advanced materials, but I'll repeat myself here a little bit. They're working with DeKalb County, Wabash County, Allen County, and I believe maybe even Huntington County on this. And we are all basically paying the exact same fee. So I benchmark what the 3,000 a month and the 36,000 retainer is the exact same price as everyone else is paying. Zach and his team have a real good understanding of where the state and federal dollars are on this. But more importantly than that, he's got relationships in Indianapolis, but then also with over 30 internet service providers. And one of the things, as we've kind of started this, the small version of the task force, we see that some of these internet service providers are kind of not realizing what others are doing and kind of almost stepping on each other. So, this contract, they will be charged with, managing all those different players, working with REMC and others. Again, I really feel like SAM strategies will have very good access and knowledge of where the state and federal dollars are coming from and when they're coming. In fact, the next level connection from the state is already getting started. And I feel confident that with this contract, this team will make sure we get those. And again, the goal of this is to use as little our Whitley County dollars as possible. Again, the most available federal and state grants as possible. And the dollars will go to the service providers. So the county cannot ask for that. I can't ask for it. The providers have to ask for those dollars. And that's where we want to help them and work with them. Again, the goal being to get, especially rural broadband service to as many Whitley County residents as possible. The contract, just to reiterate, is it's 12 months, but it's got a 30-day out clause. So if for some reason we don't think we're getting a bang for the buck, we can get out. I will come to you periodically and report on status, updates, and progress as you can then make that decision. And again, I believe we're asking for American Rescue Plan dollars to cover this service contract, and which is the same dollars that the other counties are using to cover this similar contract.
The commissioners did vote yesterday in favor of one, the agreement with CN Strategies, and that was unanimous, and also the amendment to our ARPA plan that would include allocating those, you all allocating those funds to pay for CM strategies.
When did you say the contract would start again? I missed that.
I believe it's Thursday.
Okay, any other questions for Dale or Teresa or Chad? Comments?
My only comment is, are they gonna come back as the last company did, where we're gonna be expected to pay out millions and millions more dollars that are unknown once we get started? Then they're gonna keep coming back for more millions because they don't know the final cost.
No, well, that is not how they had come previously. So that is not what I want to come forward to this council to ask for additional ARPA funds. Let me give you an example of Allen County. The deal that Sam's just presented to the Allen County Council that was approved, they were working with just one provider, which was Comcast. And it was basically a $25 million package that covers pretty much the entire rural part of Allen County that's not being served. And Allen County used 600,000 of ARPA funds for that match. So pretty good multiplier for that. So, you know, we were asking 1.7 on a prior to get just a small portion. So I'll say, no, that is not the intent, and that is not what they have done.
But this Zach will know that,
Yes.
not to bring it before us.
Well, yeah, I'll present it and I know it.
Okay,
And Joan, just to clarify, he's a consultant, not an internet service provider.
right.
So he's just bringing the players into the room and coordinating that.
But he's also searching, I thought, this is how I understood it, he's also searching those grants.
Yeah, because he's doing it for all the
Right,
counties.
so he would know
So he probably knows better than some of the internet service providers.
what is expected from the county.
Right, and we're gonna get all those players sitting down at the table, which a lot of people think, well, wait, why would a competitor sit down? But he's been successful at that at the other counties. So, you know, so the left hand knows what the right hand's doing.
All right.
We have a resolution of ordinance number.
The 2023-11.
My comment is that this is what I believe we've been asking for. That task force be developed and that go out and look for funds other than county funds to get broadband to the county. So I'm comfortable with backing this and you know, I'm in favor of it.
I think Sands, they've had success in surrounding counties, so yeah, I'm happy where the task force started and where we're going with this.
Will we get
Very good.
Will we get a monthly update?
Sure.
I make a motion that we approve the broadband facility service agreement and also approve resolution ordinance 2023-11, which is the ARPA local recovery fund appropriation.
Have a motion by John. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Nick, okay. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, the same. Passes unanimously.
Thank you, Dale.
Thanks, Teresa. Okay, budget calendar discussion, or I think you all got tentative schedule. June 28th, we get our binders June 6th at our meeting in June. On 28th, we'll have, is what Tiffany has scheduled with department heads. I know there's a little bit of conflict with some, but we'll work that out with those departments. So we're looking at the 28th. Then on June 5th, budget changes, we'll have normal council meeting after the 4th, then budget changes and recommendations, and then we'll decide from there. Any problem with that schedule? I guess we're good to go. I don't think we need a motion. Okay, then we'll set that as our budget plan. Nothing from Personnel Committee. We did not meet last month. We're meeting today, so there's nothing there. Commissioners report, Chad.
I'll start with, in April, we were awarded the Community Crossings Grant. I think everyone saw that in the email, but just wanted to give credit and kudos to the Highway Department, to Katie Fry for the application, and she did a great job with that and putting together the plan for the funds. So just wanted to highlight that. Also, before I get too far into this, I want to recognize John Barrett for 26 years of service to Whitley County. That's a huge milestone, and everyone here is grateful. I just want to make sure that we give this to you. Thank you. I'll say the jail project is progressing. If you haven't been out to the site, I recommend you go there, or at least look at pictures that we have in our office. But the site work is moving along nicely. They've got the area for the pad prepped, and there has been a few things that have come up, like there's fiber in the right of way at the entrance to the jail, and we're finding out weird things like since it's in the right of way, the county is going to be responsible for hiring the internet service provider to come in and trench that and lower it. Just little things like that we're coming across. But luckily, Wagner had that all built into contingencies. They forecast issues like that. So we're looking at signing an agreement with the internet service provider to lower that so that we're not cutting anybody's service out there while we're building our road entrance. We also signed an agreement with NIPSCO. They're going to improve the services at the jail site. There's currently 3-inch, and because of the growth that's happening out there, they believe that it needs to be upgraded to a 6-inch service. So we have an agreement for our portion of that. And then again, that's also something that will come out of the built-in contingencies that we were looking at.
That's a sizable sum, right, Chad?
It was, I think, around 180,000, I believe. I'm getting a nod, yes. So I think it was right around 180. But again, we had the funds and the contingency. We're being very mindful of that, but that's something that we couldn't not do. We have to do it. NIPSCO's saying that the 3-inch won't service us, so we're working with it. I will say that we also, in our March 20th meeting, we renewed our contract at the Reef Building. So for those who aren't aware, we lease space in the Reef Building at the corner of Van Buren and Chauncey, and that space is used by the prosecuting attorney's office when they interview minors. So we do have an agreement there, and we did renew the lease at no change to the cost. And we also then renewed our agreement with the Humane Society, no change in the price. We pay the Humane Society $25,000 a year or by animal. And if we did by animal, it would be far more than the $25,000. So the $25,000 is the cap. That's the maximum amount the county will pay. And again, no changes on that with the price of $25,000.
Is that out of seated?
I believe that is part of the seated plan.
It is.
For the Animal Society.
We
Yes,
do.
that is a seated plan item every year.
28th, we'll do it again.
No, I didn't hear you.
Told him on the 28th, we would appropriate those, or at least start the plan to appropriate those funds.
Yep. Another thing the commissioners are working on is amendments to the solar ordinance. You probably are all aware of that and likely hearing from constituents have been wanting to know if you have any involvement in that. So we are taking that on. We're looking at making some amendments to the current ordinance. And lastly, I just wanted to highlight something that's happening on Friday, May 5th at 5:30. The Columbia City Connect worked with our Whitley County Historical Museum and with our Whitley County Building Maintenance Department to place beacons. And they're implementing a digital walking tour of downtown Columbia City. I think it's pretty cool. You just download an app and you'll walk around to some historical sites right in downtown on the square. It includes the Thomas R. Marshall home, a site where there was a shootout, and just cool little stops in our downtown Columbia City that would include the courthouse and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to highlight and thank the maintenance department for agreeing to place the beacons and the museum for partnering with Columbia City Connect to get the information. So again, Friday, 5:30, they'll be launching that, but then it's self-guided. So anyone who has the app can do that on their own time whenever they'd like.
That'll make a great family outing.
Yeah.
Can I see
Any questions?
Any questions for Chad? Okay. Thank you. Minutes of our April 4th meeting.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Doris made a motion to approve as presented,
I'll second.
second by Joan. Discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approving April 4th meeting, raise your right hand. All opposed, the same. Thank you. Okay, any comments from the public? Okay. Councilman Barrett,
I have nothing.
Councilwoman Western, Councilman Hodges, Councilman Brewer, Councilman Warner.
Enjoy your retirement, Phil.
Oh, I'm
Not too bad when you used to.
Thanks.
I have nothing.
Councilman Wheeler,
You know you're
and
gonna
I
be
have
busier than
nothing.
ever.
Meeting's adjourned. Personnel does meet, so
It was a hint not to leave.
be sure